time and resources, and there have been a lot of sacrifices made to our families. This is really dangerous with 12 days before the election, knowing that there are no bronze or silver medals issued on August 3rd. But there are questions that need to be asked. So trying to honor Mr. Fink's belief in the 11th Amendment. If you don't know what the 11th Amendment is, he'll explain that later. I want to ask a question, and yes, it is a prepared question because I want to ask it specifically, because I believe that any time you make a statement, if you can't stand behind that statement yourself, you shouldn't make it. So my question is for Mr. Remersma. It's, Jay, what do you know about the attack ads that are being run right now against Wayne Kuipers and Bill Huizenga? Or do you or your consultants have anything to do with running these faceless attacks?
Well, you know, I think anytime you talk about issue advertising, by definition, it can't be coordinated with a campaign. And so I have heard the ads, and I will tell you that I think it brings up an interesting question for the 2nd Congressional District voters. Clearly, you know, Bill Huizenga and Wayne Kuipers have a different vision for taxation and spending than I do. I've laid out my vision and been pretty clear on it. And I recognize that, you know, you're going to have points in public decorum and debate that we're going to have differences of opinion. One of them is Michigan business tax that I think has destroyed and crippled our state's economy. You don't raise taxes on businesses and families when they're struggling to make ends meet. And I clearly believe that they have a different vision than I do. And so it's an opportunity for the voters to hear and listen firsthand and to experience what if their rhetoric matches the record. And so, you know, the failure of, I think, politicians and leaders in Lansing or Washington, D.C. to address those systemic changes that are necessary to get our country back on track and our state back on track is something that I welcome.
Answer the question. 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 You didn't answer the question.
Yes or no?
You need to answer the question.
What was the question, though?
What do you know about the attack that's being run?
I know that
do you and your consultants have anything to do with running these faceless attacks?
I answered the question when I said by the very definition of issue advertising, you can't have anything to do with it. And so that's the point.
Do you or don't you?
Do you or don't you? Yes or no? That's a crime. Man up.
Deny it?
Good political answer.
We will now move on to the next person entitled to ask a question is Mr. Remersma.
Wayne, this is a question for Wayne. This is something that we have made apparent here in the course of our public discourse. Wayne, do you regret your vote on the Michigan business tax, and will you disavow it today?
I guess the short answer to the question, since we're supposed to answer the question, is no. Do I think that the Michigan business tax is a good tax? My answer to that question is also no. We had eliminated the SBT, which was the single business tax in Michigan under the leadership of John Engler, back when he was still governor. And at that point, we were phasing out the business tax at 0.1% a year until it was gone. And we weren't replacing it. We decided we were going to eat the $100 million hit to the budget on an annual basis that would create. In 2006, as part of the gubernatorial election, the business community came to the legislature and said, we're not waiting for this business tax to go away. We want it gone now, and we want you to replace it. So we voted to eliminate the SBT again for a second time, only this time we did it in its entirety with the understanding and the business community's blessing that it would be replaced. The mistake we made was we didn't replace it right away. We waited for the election. We all know how that turned out. Dick DeVos lost. We had a Democrat governor reelected. but we also lost the House, which went from Republican to Democrat. And so we were tasked with creating a new business tax in an environment where the Republicans were the only pro-business group standing. When we passed the Michigan business tax, it had the support of the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, it had the support of the Michigan Manufacturers Association, and the Small Business Association of Michigan was neutral.
Next is Mr. Shedd.
I look at this a little differently. With the last 6 months, I've gotten to know all these gentlemen at this table, and I get along with each and every one of them. The way I look at this is that we should each put our best foot forward and let the people decide. Not any more difficult than that. So if you expected me to come up here and sling the mud, I'm not going to partake in that.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Riker.
I have a question for my friend Bill Heisinger, who's sitting right next to me. It's a pretty straightforward question. The Supreme Court recently ruled that it's acceptable and allowed for corporations to make donations, not donations, but to do advertising for specific political candidates. And I'm wondering if you believe that that ruling by the Supreme Court is an appropriate ruling, especially in the light of the last 100 years of history of trying to restrict labor unions and corporations from having direct influence in politics.
I appreciate the opportunity to address it, and that's part of the problem is that they have not restricted it. The labor unions especially have been very, very active in it. And as without, I'm not aware, you can applaud that, too. So I have not read the case specifically. However, in general, I do believe that the ruling on that case by the Supreme Court was one in the right direction. With this caveat, in this whole thing, the only way that we can ensure that this remains our government, all right, is that we have transparency and that we have sunshine on all of those donations and all of those organizations, and whether they're 527s and all this other stuff. And when we had the McCain-Feingold, or what's also known as BICRA, those finance rules that have been put in, those have actually layered on more complications and allowed loopholes like 527s. And I think that is the real problem that we've got to get at. We need transparency. We can't have people hiding behind anonymity, and we can't have people hiding behind faceless organizations. But to answer your question, Bill, I do accept the Supreme Court's ruling.
Senator Kuypers.
Well, I've had about 18 months of being misrepresented and having some half-truths spoken. I thought of a lot of questions, but I'm really not interested in playing gotcha politics, so I'm going to join my friend Ted and pass.
Mr. Heisinger.
Thank you, and actually, this is a challenge. We've never done this. I commend every single person that's up on this stage because they've got the guts and the knowledge and the desire to go out and serve. I don't question motives much. I question a lot of tactics. And anyone, I don't care if they're running for city council or president of the United States, their families sacrifice, they sacrifice, and for the most part, it is in pursuit of doing the right thing. And I just want to get that out. This is a policy issue, and it's a policy issue that has been debated back and forth here at the state level, and Wayne actually preceded me in that state house seat. I followed shortly behind that, and this has been something that we've dealt with both at the state level and it's applicable to the federal level. But I just want to give him an opportunity to explain why he does support No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top and some of those other programs that have come through.
I do think that education is a state issue, not a federal issue. I don't believe I've stated publicly that I support No Child Left Behind. In spite of that, I think No Child Left Behind has made education much better in Michigan.
We have never seen higher scores across the state.